Healthy self-esteem is based on the following practices: living consciously, self-acceptance, self-responsibility, self-assertiveness, living purposefully, and personal integrity. Living consciously. When we live consciously, we do not imagine that our feelings are an infallible guide to truth. And how applicable is that to the Mormon paradigm? Living consciously involves allowing ourselves to become aware, to magnify the fundamental characteristic of ourself, which is to be aware. What do we allow ourselves to become aware of? Repressed emotions, our personality. One of the things that I just kind of organically stumbled onto in my own healing process was this intensity of my personality. Because as a Latter-day Saint, I was milquetoast. I was a mama's boy. I was nice. The price of nice. You can always be nice, but you can never be real. You're a Latter-day Saint, or rarely real. So, whatever your personality is, go into it, embrace it, open yourself to it. You might be just a naturally happy, exuberant, creative, very expressive person. And Mormonism, and I'm saying this a lot to the women, because of course in Mormonism, women are to be demure and self-sacrificing and conservative. And so if your natural personality is not that, but you have to be that as an LDS woman, then that's going to create that inner conflict. And we're aware of the fact that so many LDS women in particular suffer from depression. And that's part of the reason they're just not allowed to be themselves and not allowed to experience, be aware of their natural personality. Intellectual ability. That's a huge one. Again, particularly for women in the church. With its emphasis on wife and mother in Zion and other things are secondary. To become more aware of desires, ambitions, sexuality, etc. Having a mind that is active rather than passive. Very important part of living consciously. Taking pleasure in our intelligence and intellectual abilities. Shortly after I left the church, there was a woman in my ward who left as well too. Collapse of the marriage. She had a couple of teenage kids. She just knew, she told me since she was a girl, that she could get an advanced degree. And so there she was I was approaching 50, and finally gave herself permission to do that. And she had sensed that about herself all along, because she was a very intelligent woman. Being in the moment without losing the wider context, seeking out facts rather than avoiding them, discerning between facts, interpretations, and emotions, noticing and confronting impulses to avoid or deny painful or threatening realities, knowing where we are in relation to achieving our desired goals and projects. I'm just going to quickly go through, this is the longest list of any of the 6 practices, but these are important points. Being concerned that our behavior is in alignment with our values and purposes, searching for feedback from our environment so as to adjust our course when necessary, persevering in the attempt to understand in spite of difficulties, being receptive to new knowledge and willing to change old beliefs and assumptions, being willing to see and correct mistakes, seeking always to expand awareness and being committed to learn and grow, a concern to understand the world around us. And of course, as a Latter-day Saint, your world is just really a small village. And when you leave Mormonism, you begin this exodus across this vast continent of yourself, this undiscovered country, and off you go. And it's a fascinating journey. A concern to 16. A concern to know not only our external reality, but also our internal reality, thought patterns, feelings, aspirations, motives, etc., so as not to be a stranger or a mystery to ourselves. When after I sent the letter to my bishop, telling him to remove my name from the church's records, he contacted me and said, well, you have to meet with me and the stake president. So I went to the local chapel, and it was a short meeting, door opened, and I went, there was the two men. The stake president had my letter in hand. We sat down after a few sort of niceties. The stake president went over just basically the process of resigning from the church. And then he held up my letter and he said, why do you want to leave the church? And I just sat there for a couple of seconds of silence. And the words flooded into my mind, which then I articulated to him, if I don't leave the church, I will never know my true self. And the evidence of my personal experience in the last 14 years is such a powerful testimony of the truthfulness of that revelation. Of course, he had a look on his face like he couldn't understand. Yeah, exactly. 17, a concern to be aware of the beliefs and values that govern our behavior and their roots, so as not to mindlessly, unconsciously, live according to the beliefs and values of other people. And that's part of this individuation process, because of course for all of us as kids, we just sucked up the beliefs and values of our parents, by and large. And as we gained more experience, and hopefully got a little bit of experience outside of the LDS world, our opinions, our perspectives started to shift and change. And so we started to psychologically separate, to individuate, which we needed to do. Next slide. Practice of self-acceptance. Big one, right? For Latter-day Saints. Self-acceptance is the refusal to be in an adversarial relationship to oneself, to non-judgmentally regard ourselves just as we are and how we used to be.
So that is self-acceptance. No matter what I have done in my life, no matter the people who I have affected positively or negatively, no matter the opportunities that I have pursued or not pursued, no matter the amount of time that I spent in the LDS church or not, all of that is a part of who I am, who you are up to this point, and I fully, completely, and non-judgmentally accept that. And there's great power in that level, if you will, or that quality of self-acceptance. No condemnation. And this is why, is it coming up in the next point? It's coming up in the next point. Self-acceptance involves understanding that everyone acts according to their level of awareness. So when we watch the news about Saddam Hussein and the stuff that's going on in Iraq, those people who are blowing themselves up, having been psychologically conditioned by an extremist part of the Islamic religion to do so, but they are doing so even more fundamentally than that, because they're operating on a certain level of awareness. There's psychological conditioning obviously going on, but they're just acting according to their level of awareness. Now, if they wanted to improve, if they wanted to be better people, then it would involve them shifting to basically a higher awareness about themselves, maybe starting to question, well, why the legitimacy of the idea of blowing yourself up because there's virgins in the afterlife, that kind of thing. It's as true for them as it is for us. That is a universal principle. Mentally beating up on ourselves, i.e. feeling guilty, does not make better people. A desire to change one's behavior does. And what causes us to want to change?
It's when the pain and discomfort of our current situation becomes greater than what we perceive will be the pain and discomfort involved in changing. So the person who's a crack addict, who finally, or an alcoholic who finally bottoms out. Maybe they've fallen off the wagon 100 times, but they finally have that last crisis where they just finally get it, that the pain involved with getting over my addiction is going to be less than the pain that I'm in.